are you familiar with the concept of emotional labor?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to speak about it a little bit just for the audience to get it. So emotional labor being if something provocative happens, whether it could be something provocative in a positive way or a negative way. So if someone came across the camera right now and tripped on a cord and did a total like comical fall, we would maybe think it's funny, but it would be inappropriate to laugh. We would push down our reaction to it and we'd say, "Are you okay?" And they got off camera and then we'd probably start laughing, right? Or something that is provocative in a challenging way and it causes us to have a strong emotion in the other direction. So anything that's provocative that elicits an emotion, we are always monitoring the environment we're in. And we are always figuring out what's appropriate for that environment, how to express ourselves. So you have an inciting action that raises an emotion. So if you think of a triangle, the top of the triangle is emotion. And the bottom left would be expression, the way that you express that emotion. But bottom right is environment. And human beings are always looking at their environment, figuring out what is the proper way to express my emotion. And if it's a provocative emotion, we are making ultra quick judgments on that. And of course, everyone's different. They're raised different, have different life experiences. Emotional labor is when we have to manage our emotional responses because we recognize the environment is a different one. We have to think about it. And the way that I describe it for leaders is sometimes something happens and you realize the environment you're in and you push your reaction all the way down. Other times you push the reaction halfway down so that you can transform it into a response.
Yep.
So if we think of kind of like old school business from like the 70s or something like that, where yelling in a workplace was like acceptable.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if it was ever acceptable, but it'd be something that would be more common.
Yep.
Where now, in the modern work world, you would never yell at someone.
Absolutely.
But you could be angry. And you could want to express that anger, but in an appropriate way. Push it down halfway, transform it into an appropriate response. So if we go to the logic of appropriateness, that preference to me is someone just being, and I hear this a lot from leaders, but they'll use the word authenticity. If I'll say about how people use jokes or stories or aggressive language or how they can be not direct or too direct, people often say, well, that's just me being authentic. And that's where I have to challenge that because it's like the get out of jail free pass,
yes.
Especially in modern business where people value authenticity. I want you to bring your whole self to work, but I want you to bring that self to work that can work as well with as many people in as many different situations as quickly as possible. And that's not the same person as you that's on the couch in your sweatpants.
Absolutely.
So when I think about emotional labor, I think it ties in with that law or the logic of appropriateness is leaders have to govern themselves in a way that's constantly thinking about the environment, how I express myself, which means there rarely is a shortcut.
I agree, right? And I think also self-discipline is really important in a leadership role, right? So one should never shoot from the hip, right? So sometimes, you get it, something in a meeting or an email, right? And it really makes you angry. It frustrates you, right? And you should never heed your first initial reactions to this, right? I've done this 2 or 3 times where I get an email or something that I realized and I was really angry, wrote an email, said something. This is where I always later on regretted this, right? So I think it's really important to be able to step down, reduce the emotion, and then really think about, okay, what's the appropriate response here, right? And very often the appropriate response is not what you came up in a split second, right? But this is what I see a lot, unfortunately, right? Still right? You mentioned yelling at people. That's a very radical and unacceptable way of dealing with these situations. But I've seen also in communication or how people blow up in a meeting and so on, right? Never lose your cool by the end of the day.
Yeah, because, on one spectrum, it's yelling. The other side, it could be people being passive aggressive, withdrawing from a conversation, sitting in too much silence. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. I asked you before, what's something you learned about yourself that you really like since taking this role? But now the question I'm asking is, what's something that you've learned about yourself since taking on this leadership role that you didn't like, and as a result, you've had to work on?
Oh, fantastic question, right? Harsh communication.
Okay.
Right. I think for sure, right? This is probably still something that I'm working on. I think, and we talked about academic subcultures, and part of the academic subculture, at least where I call like the right? Whereas very aggressive research seminars, right? Where, I mean, you didn't take any prisoners, right? It was all about the argument, making, and that's something that I enjoyed, right? I always enjoyed this intellectual and rhetorical battle, right? Where also sometimes very harsh things were said. I loved that. And I also, I think, especially at the beginning, I also kind of brought this to the job. I toned it down a little bit, but I think I can sometimes still see how this bubbles up, right? And I don't like this. It's like going back to the logic of appropriateness. It might be appropriate in a research seminar, but it's definitely not appropriate in a team or business setting, not at all, right? It's simply a very different kettle of fish. That's definitely something that I still have to work on, but I also don't like about me, right? And now, of course, I mean, there are always many things that you don't like about yourself, right? I mean, but it's also about the realization, right, that you might be different. So I'm, for example, not the most formal guy on earth, right? That I think is a weakness for sure, right? I don't like, I mean, right? Compliance rules. I mean, they are really important. I stick to them, right? But it's not something that, right, that I spend a lot of time on. I think I'm more an agile decision maker by the end of the day, right? And that's, right, does bring its weaknesses. This is something where I realized, oh shit, right? You never realized that you're a person like this. No, probably not, right? I mean, I think we all know that we are not perfect human beings. It's a great question.
So in your evolution, not just the school's evolution, but in your growth in this role now, because you're into your 6th year yourself
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
What's different about you in year 6 than year 1?
Oh, a lot. I think I mean, the entire demeanor. I think I'm more presidential now in how I come across. I think I'm much more professional in my communication. Also, some of these easy mistakes that you make at the beginning, I think I got rid of, right? That you want to be buddies with everyone. I think at the beginning, I think I also sometimes blurred the boundaries between my personal and my professional life. Because, I mean, that's also part of being an academic, right? I mean, you interact with people professionally, but you also interact with them as a friend, for example. And that is something that I have started to, I mean, move down a little bit, for example, right? So there are many, many learnings, right, about myself, but also how I can improve. And I think that's also part of this journey. I mean, this is also going back to, I mean, some of the hardcore stuff that we talked about, right? I mean, for me, hardcore was also always about becoming ever a better person, right? To reflect, to not get drawn into your emotions, to think about the person that you are. And that does help me.